Talk about the time Star-Lord went toe-to-toe with Old Man Logan. After Civil War II, the Guardians showed up to help Carol Danvers, but during the battle, their ship was destroyed and they were stranded on Earth. Pete wasn't exactly honest with the rest of the team about Carol Danvers' methods during Civil War II, and they're pretty pissed at him at the moment, so no one's talking to him on Earth. Abigail Brand shows up and tells Pete that he needs to get his shit together, that he's a total fucking mess. He shouldn't be drinking like this at 11 in the morning, but the concept of having an appropriate time to drink is absolutely nuts to him. But she says her job is to keep the planet safe from alien menaces, and that includes Peter Quill and his cronies. She realizes they've helped save the planet before, and that's why they're not locked in some jail. She says just to keep himself busy and stay out of trouble, and to help him do that, she gives him a phone with all of his known Earth contacts on it, which turns out not to be many. He calls Howard the Duck at first and is explaining how he finds it a little depressing being trapped on Earth, and Howard gets pissed off and he's like, well, why don't you try being trapped on Earth as a duck? In a fit of rage, he tells Quill why doesn't he quit his crying and go visit an art gallery or do something with his time, you know, like a normal looking person can do. So Pete does exactly that. Only while he's there enjoying the art that he knows nothing about, he hears a familiar voice. As it turns out that his very recent ex-girlfriend Kitty Pryde is giving a lecture to a bunch of her students. As she's being teased, she makes it abundantly clear that Peter is no longer her boyfriend. He says that he's just bored and he's stuck on Earth for a while and he thinks it would be nice if they could spend some time together, but she gets really pissed when she realizes Pete is carrying his gun inside of a museum. In his defense, he's confused. He says, is there a certain time you're not supposed to carry a gun too? But Kitty just storms off, saying that she's going to have to go watch actual children now. Pete's behind her begging, saying he just wanted a friend or somebody to hang out with. Not trying to be a creep when Old Man Logan steps in front of him and says, well, you kinda are. Tell Star-Lord, you know, you're raising your voice at your ex-fiancé in front of a bunch of children while you're carrying a gun. You better get to stepping. Kitty does apologize to Peter and says that there's just a lot going on right now and that she doesn't have the time. He leaves knowing that he's a nuisance and bitching about the fact that Brand gave him a phone with only 2 contacts on it. He gets stopped by a homeless person who's asking for some spare money. When he turns around to run off before Quill can even hand him anything, Pete thinks to himself that everybody on this planet hates him. Turns out that the guy was just scared of what was behind him. At this point, Star-Lord's absolutely furious and tells Logan to leave it alone. He can quit the Big Brother act. As Logan stares him down harder, he's like, wait, are we actually going to fight? And looking him dead in his eyes, Old Man Logan tells him he has no interest in knocking out some kid. But him being unconscious isn't entirely out of the question. The two go toe-to-toe at a local dive bar, pounding beer after beer. The two start talking, and they have a lot of common. They relate over the fact that this doesn't feel like home to either of them. As they're enjoying each other's company and blowing off some much-needed steam, Quill gets up to break the seal. While Old Man Logan's sitting there by himself, he catches the whiff of something familiar. Before the would-be attacker could even finish pulling his weapon, Logan hops up and cuts his hand clean off. As Quill heads out of the little boy's room, he's the bar in an absolute frenzy, attacking Old Man Logan and jumping into the fight quickly because he absolutely lives for this shit. The situation ends up outside in the street. As it does too many times, guns get pulled and shots start getting fired. Quill's teasing Logan, saying, don't you have a healing factor? Why are you hiding? And he says, you know, the older I get, the more the bullets hurt. As Wolverine sees an innocent bystander get hit, he goes into an absolute frenzy. Star-Lord runs over to check on the girl who has just been grazed, but as he looks up, he sees a car flying right towards them, quickly pulls his element gun, shoots out a bunch of earth, causing the car to flip and wreck and saving his and the girl's life. Quill looks around to see that Logan has not only disappeared, but now he's completely surrounded by cops. When Star-Lord is busy trying to explain who he is, the cop says, I don't give a shit if you're Captain America. You are under arrest. And to make matters worse, while he's in criminal court, he's going up against a really good lawyer, Matt Murdock. In his closing argument, he states that, you know, New York is full of superheroes, but that doesn't give any of them the right to parade around with a gun and destroy public property. And even though his element gun isn't exactly an actual firearm, he still is incredibly dangerous, but he gets cut off by Abigail Brand, who is actually there to step up and defend Peter. She explains Quill's life and that he truly is a hero. He's saved the galaxy multiple times, and he's never really been a part of Earth. Not fair that people are willing to turn a blind eye to vigilante justice like daredevils, when Peter Quill is also a true blue hero. She convinces the judge to release Star-Lord into her custody on the condition he serves 100 hours of community service and pays a $10,000 fine, and they'll keep his element gun in lockup until he does so. Quill thanks Brand for all this and is actually kind of excited because he said kids love him and they're going to love meeting a true blue superhero in real life. But it turns out Quill's community service will actually be served out at a retirement home. The old man Quill is assigned to is pissed because his son signed him up for this program. Pete ends up dragging him out of the house anyway and says that they're off on brand new adventures, but the old man tells him he's had enough adventures to last him a lifetime. But after the man gives a big speech about how he's lived too dangerous of a life, Star-Lord says he just meant like going out for ice cream. But even though they're not looking for real adventure found them as Star-Lord sees an active bank robbery. Luckily, the amazing Miss Marvel shows up and starts fighting it, and the old man tells Quill, look, a real superhero's here, we can leave it alone. It turns out the robbers were a little more powerful than Kamala was expecting. Quill jumps into the fight, even though he's kind of useless without the element guns. Gets even more in the way when Mind Blast is causing Kamala to start attacking Peter. Now, Pete's new pal actually distracts Mind Blast, just long enough for the heroes to get control again and knock her out. Pete tells the old man he's amazing, that he totally saved them, and Kamala comes over and gives Star-Lord an earful. Points out the fact that Pete has no powers, and then he brought along a senior citizen who also has no powers, and put both of them in danger. She's a literal child, and even she knows that's incredibly irresponsible. Kamala begins packing the bank robbers off, and Quill turns around and stares at a giant duffel bag full of money on the ground, as Mr. Allen tells him that that's just a bag full of trouble. He takes him back to the retirement center, where Quill has an awkward run-in with Mr. Allen's son. The two have a tumultuous relationship. They begin arguing, which obviously father-son arguments are a trigger for Pete. Not only does Mr. Allen win the argument, but he convinces his son to give Pete a job. Now, Pete accepts, obviously, because he's desperately needing money to pay his fines. It turns out he's the new bartender at the bar with no name, and as you can see, he fits right in. The clientele at the bar, including Shocker, love Star-Lord, and they tell him that he fits right in, and it's like he was made for this job. And Pete says that, oddly enough, this is the most at-home he's felt since he's been back on Earth. He says sure, he may be the only non-powered dude in a bar full of powered villains, but it makes him feel like he's back in space, walking around some foreign alien city. It feels familiar. We even see his boss telling Star-Lord that he really needs to consider doing this full time. And he'll consider staying on because he is the best he is at what he does, and what he does best is 10 bar. Star-Lord then goes to take the trash out and end his shift, but as he does, he notices a pretty mysterious shadow behind him. And the next thing you know, he's in a full-on brawl with the devil of Hell's Kitchen. Now, Star-Lord's no stranger to back alley bar fights, and honestly holds his own for a little bit. But eventually, Daredevil gets the best of him as he pins him down and tells him he was supposed to stay out of trouble. Now, Pete, once again, is confused. He doesn't know the rules on Earth like everybody else does, and he's wondering if there's supposed to be a time to take the trash out. But as he goes to walk away, Hornhead asks him where's the money, and Pete is even more lost. Daredevil tells him he knows about the bank robbery that Star-Lord and Miss Marvel stopped, but there's $4,000 that's still missing. Quill doesn't appreciate being accused like this, and Daredevil says he knows his history. He knows he was a space cop, a planet ruler somehow, a pirate, adventurer, and most of all, a thief. Star-Lord tells this oddly dressed ninja that he didn't take any money, and Daredevil automatically believes him, so he tosses him his card and says if you hear anything about it, let me know. Quill then goes back to his apartment where he's trying to get a hold of Kitty and apologizes for how he was acting the other day, and offers to get coffee with his ex if that's a thing people in New York City still do. But the man literally can't catch a break, as his sister has shown up to try and kill him. She blames Pete for the fact that she'll never be able to rule the Spartax Empire, but sees that he's too pathetic to even bother taking his life. Star-Lord then goes back to fulfilling his duties of community service as he heads out with Mr. Allen. And as Pete is ranting about his problem, Edmund honestly seems to understand him better than anybody else. Although it's rather vague, he gives Pete plenty of advice that only somebody that has been in his shoes could give. As they stop to get some ice cream, Pete notices that this old man is absolutely loaded all of a sudden. And as they head back to the retirement home, he can't help himself but question Edmund about where all of that money came from. And surprisingly enough, this harmless old man admits that he took it. Despite the fact that he himself is needing to pay off $10,000 worth of fines, Pete does the right thing, being the hero he is, and calls Daredevil to turn the cash back in. Now, Daredevil's being inquisitive and says, oh, you just all of a sudden found this money from a friend? Star-Lord knows how it looks, but he tells him that that's the God's honest truth, and Daredevil believes him, much to Pete's surprise. He tells him for a guy that's so judgy, he's pretty quick to believe him, and Daredevil tells him, well, it's like a sixth sense. Of course, being thorough, Daredevil wants the name of who took the money, and Pete tells him that he's not doing that he's an old man and he's just going through some shit. Now, after some coercing, Daredevil agrees and tells Pete that he won't take the old man in, but he needs to know his name to make sure that this is just a one-time thing. After Star-Lord tells him the name is Edmund Allen, Daredevil's not only shocked, but is surprised he recognizes it. If all of that wasn't enough, to make matters more complicated, one of Pete's patrons at the bar with no name has found himself in a pretty tough predicament. Due to an unintentional and unwanted team-up with Daredevil, Star-Lord has just learned that the old man he had been court-ordered to hang out with was actually a supervillain. Daredevil had recognized the name Edmund Allen because years ago he actually went by the Silver Bandit and had a run-in with the Man with No Fear. Edmund explains that years ago, his brother was a super genius who ended up working for a bad company that turned out to be AIM, but he had been tasked with reverse engineering some alien technology. His super genius brother actually figured out that the suit he was working on could fix to a perfect position in space, meaning that while the Earth is moving at 20 miles per second, if you lock the suit in, it will stay perfectly still. As the world would rotate around it, the suit would stay in place, destroying whatever would come in its path. His brother figured out to reverse engineer this technology to where you could actually control where you wanted the gloves and boots to be, much giving you the ability to have flight or super strength. Unfortunately, his brother didn't give AIM any of the updates on what he had done or figured out with the suit, and when Edmund shows up, he finds his brother about to be killed. It turned out that Edmund actually had the gloves and the boots, and his brother wasn't going to tell them that for fear that they would kill him too. He used that technology to rob the super rich. Edmund never really made a whole bunch of money for himself as he gave most of it away, but Daredevil doesn't care that he was doing a Robin Hood act. It's still illegal. But the old man tells him this cost him everything. His wife left him. His son barely speaks to him when he found out what his father was doing. And he points out if Daredevil thinks you can't break the law in order to help people, what he's doing is pretty fucking hypocritical. Eventually, the Devil of Hell's Kitchen agrees and then leaves, but tells Star-Lord he'll be keeping an eye on him. See Edmund sitting down exhausted, saying that, he thought he was above all of this. He did what he wanted, and he helped people sometimes, but in the end, everyone left him because he shut them all out. Warns Peter, this is what this life looks like on the other side of bad decisions. Back at work at the bar with no name, Pete has one of his patrons, Shocker, come up to him and tell him that he's pretty concerned. He tells Star-Lord that Diamond Head went missing from the bar the other night, and he's worried about his drinking buddy. Star-Lord agrees to go check out the situation. He walks out into the alley and uses his helmet to kind of get a read on everything, and Shocker sees that that's some Iron Man shit right there, that Pete actually is a superhero. Seeing the residue on the wall, he figures that Diamond Head has been kidnapped. And while whoever the perpetrator was able to avoid the cameras, they still got a license plate on screen, and Pete was able to call in a favor to Abigail Brand, who was able to give him a name as soon as he read the license plate. Shocker's apologizing to Quill because the two are having to take an Uber, but he explains that Spider-Man wrecked his car. Which Quill says, man, that's Spider-Man. Threat or menace, am I right? Once they arrive at the building, the Shocker is able to breach the lock on the door with his Vibro Smashers, and Pete points out how funny the Shocker's Vibro Smashers sounds. After they successfully break in, they find that Diamond Head is there and has been cut all to pieces. And that is when shit really hits the fan. They get attacked by a group of thugs, and Pete is fighting back as his shirt gets cut off of him yet again. But during the fight, Pete gets knocked out, and once he finally comes to, he wakes up to see that he's now being held hostage, that the Shocker and Diamond Head actually got away and left him, and he finds his captor is Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, and his boss, because she owns the bar where he works. See, owning the bar has given her plenty of business opportunities because people in there tell her things. She cuts other criminals off before they can pull off heists and takes the money for herself. And hell, she even had a guy that she could cut his limbs off and he would grow back new diamond limbs. But you can only rip off your own clientele for so long, so she has one big final heist she wants to pull. She sets Peter free because she's going to make him do it. Now, Pete rushes to the retirement home to make sure Felicia hasn't done anything to his old pal Edmund. But when Pete sees that the old man is just fine, he gets a call from Felicia telling him that he's going to need the Silver Bandit to pull off this job. And she can guarantee he's going to come out of retirement or he'll never see his son again. Star-Lord is nothing if not crafty. We see him coming up with some plans and telling Edmund this is all going to work out as he calls his ex Kitty Pryde to ask her for a favor. Shocker is back at the bar with no name, telling all his drinking buddies what he saw the night before and that their favorite bartender is likely dead. That's when Felicia arrives to tell everybody that she owns the place. Now, she's been using this as a way to get secrets on all the villains and cut them off from jobs. But the Black Cat is nothing if not crafty. She tells all of the patrons there that Star-Lord was actually the one leaking all of the secrets and he's been taken care of. But there's one more traitor among them, and that happens to be Javelin, who, unbeknownst to the people of the bar, is the old thief that Felicia has Peter and Edmund robbing. After some recon, Star-Lord and Edmund find the best way to break into Javelin's very guarded apartment. Thanks to Star-Lord's helmet, some infrared light receivers, and years of skill and experience, Pete has no problem getting past Javelin's security. But Javelin herself is in quite a bit of hot water as Felicia has turned the entire bar against her. As Javelin is fighting for her life, it turns out that Quill was actually 2 steps ahead, and while he was calling Kitty earlier, he was actually calling to get the help of a new friend. As Old Man Logan shows up in disguise and reveals that he's the hired muscle there to help Javelin. It turns out Quill didn't only have a contingency plan for that, but he has also sent Daredevil to save Edmund's son so that Felicia has nothing to hold over their heads. Star-Lord and Silver Bandit crack the safe at Javelin's house. Felicia all of a sudden shows up, and Pete is so confused. She's a master burglar. Why did she need them to do this? She simply tells him she runs the whole show now. It's all about power. It's all about delegation. Now, Felicia doesn't really need the trivial things that Javelin's collected over the years. What she wants is her book. Javelin's an old thief, and she's the best of the best, and she has notes and records of every place she's broken into, what's worth stealing, and how easy it is to get there. She also reveals she wants Edmund to keep working for her. She has no intentions of letting Greg go. Back at the bar with No Name, we see Logan and Javelin duking it out with all of these villains. While they're struggling just with the sheer numbers alone, the tide finally gets turned in their favor when Shocker, 8-Ball, and Melter, some of Pete's favorite customers, decide to join in and help. Back at Javelin's apartment, Daredevil shows up and starts taking down Felicia's thugs. This lets Star-Lord know that Greg is in the clear and that he's ready to make the call. When things turn to shit, the Black Cat goes to make her get away, but Pete's not letting it happen as he takes off after her. Star-Lord at this point is absolutely fed up. He's stuck on this shit planet, he has a shit love life, he's been arrested. Felicia wants to know why he even cares. He's just a bartender. As they begin to punch, kick, and claw as the two fight each other, he says, because I'm Peter Quill, dammit. I am a guardian of the galaxy. That galaxy includes bars, penthouses, and most importantly, people. But the fight's brought to a halt when Pete's backup has finally arrived as Felicia goes to make her get away. She jumps off the side of the building. It turns out that Edmund was sitting there waiting for her. He catches Felicia out of midair and tells her he's not letting her go. Edmund's estranged son, Greg, looks up and sees his dad midair being a hero, stopping a bad guy. Felicia warns Edmund that if she goes away, the famous Silver Bandit is going to too, to which he says he's fine with. But the Black Cat's not giving up that easy. As she lunges forward, she grabs Edmund by the throat and tells him, well, maybe a hospital or a morgue would be more your speed. She whispers in his ear, you never cross a Black Cat. All this proves to be too much of a strain on Edmund's 73-year-old body, and as he begins to lose consciousness, Felicia frees herself from his grip. He begins free-falling out of the sky and crashing back down into the earth. We see Quill shooting up out of bed as he keeps having night terrors about how he dies. We see him pushing himself through his day, a day he has been dreading, as he remembers his old friend Edmund and how he passed. He shows up to Edmund's funeral as he talks to his son Greg and tells him how sorry he is and how he feels like this is all his fault. But Quill spent a lot of time with Edmund and he wants to make sure Greg understands that his dad loved him a lot. He would have given his life 10 times over to save his son, and he knew how his son really felt about him. We see Pete meeting with Edmund's ex-wife, and as the two are talking, she reveals that she wishes she tried harder with him, but all of those secrets he kept. Once the trust is gone, what do you really have? This hits Pete like a ton of bricks because of everything that's went on and all the secrets he has kept from the Guardians, and all of a sudden he receives a letter. Javelin, the woman from the bar that Pete had just went out of his way to save, has invited him up to her apartment. With the life that Javelin's lived as a supervillain, to see somebody ensure her safety meant a lot to her. So in order to pay Quill back, she's going to pay off all of his fines, making him a free man. As she sits down beside Star-Lord and puts her hand on his leg, he says, wait, are you seducing me? Which gets a good laugh out of her. She tells Pete that he's much too young, as another voice says, yeah, kid. As Old Man Logan walks down the stairs and says, you're just now learning how to grow a beard. Now, Logan realizes that Pete's being awfully pissy and tells him that he should be happy. He's getting what he wants. He's going to get his chance to get off the planet. Now he can go endanger some senior citizens somewhere else. Star-Lord can't help himself at this point. He tells Logan fuck you as he punches him in the face. The two begin fighting and brawling. As Old Man Logan begins to grapple him, he tells him he's not tough enough, but that's not a bad thing. Wrapping Star-Lord around the shoulders, he calmly says Pete, and Quill realizes that the old man is giving him a hug. He knew Quill was going to need to get some of that anger out, so he let him do it on him. Logan tells him, listen kid, you've won this one. You saved the kid. You saved Javelin. You're all paid up on your fines. You can leave now. But it came at a cost, and winning while losing somebody will mess you up, kid. Even though there's a line of people waiting to forgive you, I know that means nothing to you because you have to forgive yourself. You have to make things as right as you can and move on. That's life. As Pete gives his new friend a big hug, he realizes your robe is open, isn't it? And Logan tells him, yeah. The next day we see Matt Murdock paying Edmund's son a visit and telling him he missed his father's will reading. Matt hands him a package and tells him he knows what it's like to lose a father to violence. It's so sudden and big that it doesn't seem real, and you coast through the funeral and everybody consoling you and the ritual of it all. But then you come home and your dad's dead. You're watching a movie and your dad is still gone. You're folding clothes, you try to go back to your job, and that hole in your life just doesn't get filled. He tells Greg your father is dead, and nothing is going to change that, but he wanted you to have this because he loved you. As Greg takes the box upstairs and opens it and sees he's been given the Silver Bandit's old gear. Now Pete goes to track down his old buddy Rocket as he is still extremely pissed at him. Pete apologizes and tells him that the Guardians are his family and that he should have trusted them. He should have never kept secrets. Rocket tells him he's damn right. He waltzes around like he's their leader. He left them to go be the leader of a planet, and then he comes back to assume his position as leader again, only to hide secrets from all of them. It's macho bullshit and he's over it. As he gets up and storms out, Pete wants to know what he can do, and Rocket just tells him, it's time, Pete. Sometimes it's your friend, and it's not your enemy. After their little scuffle, Brand shows up to take Peter away from there, beam him up to Alpha Flight's office where she returns his element guns. She tells Pete she spoke of his recent actions. He's legally clear and free to go now. His ship is about to be fixed, and he's about to be with his family, the Guardians, again. Peter tells her he's ready to find a home, and she tells him that his home moves. It's a hole with controls and his weird friends in it. She tells Star-Lord not to confuse stationary with home. Get your guns, get your weird friends, and get the fuck off my planet.